Hey, what's up, everyone? Today, we're going to plug in, turn it up loud, and talk about a musical rebellion that basically just ripped up the rulebook and started over. This is the story of punk.
So, you ever find yourself scrolling through Spotify or TikTok and every single song just sounds a little too perfect? Like it was made by a computer. Super polished, super clean, and honestly, kind of boring. Well, just imagine if pretty much all music felt that way. That was the world back in the 1970s, and it's the world that punk rock was born to completely tear apart. So, let's paint a picture of what was going on back then. On one side, you had these massive rock bands. I'm talking 10-minute songs, super complicated guitar solos, huge stadium shows. It was epic for sure, but also kinda exclusive. But at the same time, something was bubbling up from underneath in these tiny, sweaty little clubs, and it was the complete opposite. This was punk rock. We're talking short, fast, simple songs played with pure, raw energy. The point wasn't to be a perfect musician. Nope. The point was to get your message out right now. And that brings us to the most important idea in all of punk. It's kind of like its secret operating system, its core philosophy. It's an idea that basically says you don't have to wait for anyone's permission to make something awesome. This secret code is called the do-it-yourself ethic, or just DIY. And you already know what this is. Seriously, instead of waiting for a big studio to maybe hire you to make a game, you and your friends just get together and code your own. Instead of trying to get on TV, you start your own YouTube or TikTok channel. That's the DIY spirit. It's all about grabbing the controls and just making your own thing your own way. So how did a punk band actually do it? Well, it was like a super simple 4-step guide. First, write some songs. Don't worry about long, fancy solos. It's all about speed and energy. Second, record it yourself. Who cares if it's in a garage or a basement? Just get it done. Third, you make your own art. Draw your own album cover, make these little homemade magazines called fanzines to tell people about your band. And last, step 4, you sell the tapes and the zines yourself, right at your shows. You are the artist, the record label, and the whole marketing department all rolled into one. And yeah, the look was a huge part of it, but the punk uniform wasn't a costume. Think of it more like a jersey for your team or skin in a video game. It was a signal. The ripped-up clothes, the leather jackets, the wild hair, it was all a visual way of saying, hey, I'm not playing by the normal rules. It's how you found your people, your crew. Now here's where it gets really cool. An idea this simple and this powerful, well, it's not going to stay the same for long, right? People immediately started taking the basic punk formula and remixing it, which created this whole family tree of amazing new sounds. So let's follow the map here. Everything kicks off in the mid-70s with classic punk rock, but just a few years later it starts to branch out. You've got some bands getting all experimental, creating post-punk, and others getting way more catchy, which became new wave. Then, in the early 80s, this scene called hardcore cranks the speed dial all the way up. And finally, by the end of the decade, things get slower and heavier, and that gives us grunge. Let's dig into each of these.
Okay, first up, post-punk. The best way to think about this one is as the what if update. It's like the developers of the original punk game released a massive update patch that added a ton of new creative tools to play with.
These post-punk bands took the original energy of punk, but they started asking all these cool questions. What if the bass line was actually the main melody? What if we threw in some synthesizers and weird sound effects? What if our lyrics were more like poems or scenes from a movie? It just got a lot more artsy and atmospheric. And at the very same time, you had new wave pop up. So if post-punk was the moody, experimental artist, new wave was its super popular, colorful cousin who was totally ready for TV. It took that punk energy, but blended it with poppy hooks and synthesizers to make these incredibly catchy songs you'd hear all over the radio. Okay, now we're jumping into the 1980s, and this is when different scenes grabbed that core punk idea and just pushed it to the absolute limit, but in totally opposite directions.
So on one end of the dial, you have hardcore punk. I mean, just imagine taking a punk song and cranking the speed stat all the way to 100. The songs were unbelievably fast. A lot of them were under a minute long, with these really direct lyrics about sticking together and having a code of ethics. The shows were nuts, and it created this incredibly strong, tight-knit community.
And then, on the complete other side of things, you get grunge. If hardcore was hitting fast forward, grunge was like hitting slow-mo. They took that same raw punk emotion, but they slowed everything way, way down, and mixed it with these super heavy guitar riffs from old 70s rock. The lyrics got a lot more personal, and the fashion was all about just whatever was comfortable. Flannel shirts, old boots, you get the idea.
So for over 10 years, all this incredible music was happening just under the surface, in basements and small clubs. But then the early 1990s rolled around and something absolutely huge happened. The underground exploded.
And boom, this is what happened. It was like a secret everybody learned at the same time. The music that had been for this small underground scene was suddenly everywhere. Bands that were inspired by punk and grunge were on every radio station, on TV. They went from playing for 50 people to playing in massive stadiums. The entire music world got flipped on its head.
And what that proved was so important. The fact that these bands got so huge showed the world that you didn't need to be perfectly polished to connect with millions of people. In fact, being raw, being honest, and being a little messy, that could be the biggest thing in the world.
So if you forget everything else we talked about today, please remember this. This is the main takeaway. Punk's greatest legacy, the biggest idea it gave us, is this. It taught an entire generation that you do not need anyone's permission to be creative and to have a voice. Not from a label, not from a company, not from anybody.
And that DIY idea is probably more important today than it ever was. I mean, you literally have a recording studio and a television station right in your pocket. So I want to leave you with this question. With all the tools you have right now, if you were going to start a movement, a band, a channel, whatever, what would it be about? What's the thing you feel like you need to say?